Algebra problems about buying and selling alcoholic drinks. 3 drunkards, A, B, and C, having each of them run up a separate score at an alehouse, agreed to go, under pretence to drink, and rub all out, which was done accordingly. But the landlord remembered very well that A's and B's reckoning added together made 16 shillings 10 pence and a half, and B's and C's 13 shillings 3 pence and a quarter, and A's and C's 11 shillings 5 pence and 3 quarters. He therefore craves your assistance from hence to tell him each man's distinct score. I think that one's interesting because what that means is these guys conspired to erase their tab from the landlord's, the bartender's record book. Having laid out 37 shillings in brandy at 2 shillings and rum at 3 shillings a pint, I find that I could have bought as many pints of rum as I now have of brandy, and as many of brandy as now of rum for 4 shillings less. How much was bought? A vintner sold at one time 20 dozen of port wine and 30 dozen of sherry, and for the whole received 120 guineas. At another time he sold 30 dozen of port and 25 dozen of sherry at the same prices as before, and for the whole received 140 guineas. What was the price of a dozen of each sort of wine? And this one is one that gives the answer, like they often did. A man bought some cider at $4 per barrel and some beer at $7. There were 6 barrels more of the cider than of the beer, and 2/5 of the price of the beer was equal to 1/2 of the price of the cider. Required the number of barrels of each. I'm assuming it's alcoholic cider because that was common. A brewer, from a certain quantity of ingredients which cost $20, brews 500 gallons of ale, on which there is a duty of 6 pence a gallon, and sells it at 2 shillings a gallon. Afterwards, from the same quantity of ingredients, he brews a certain number of gallons of strong beer, on which he pays the ale duty and the remainder small beer, making together the same number of gallons as before, when, by mixing them together and selling the mixture as ale, he finds his gains increased in the proportion of 10 to 7. Determine the number of gallons of strong beer, supposing the duty on small beer 1/4 of that on ale. A person exchanged a quantity of brandy for a quantity of rum, and 11 pounds 5 shillings, the brandy and rum being each valued at as many shillings per gallon as there were gallons of that liquor. Now, had the rum been worth as many shillings per gallon as the brandy was, the whole value of the rum and brandy would have been 56 pounds 5 shillings. How many gallons were there of each? So that one's actually pretty contrived. It's not really a thing that would happen. A merchant finds that if he mixes sherry and brandy in quantities which are in the proportion of 2 to 1, he can sell the mixture at 78 shillings per dozen. But if the proportion be as 7 to 2, he must sell it at 79 shillings a dozen. Required the price of each liquor. A smuggler had a quantity of brandy which he expected would sell for 198 shillings. After he had sold 10 gallons, a revenue officer seized 1/3 of the remainder, in consequence of which he sells the whole for only 162 shillings. Required the number of gallons he had, and the price per gallon. A man ordered a wine merchant to fill 2 casks of different sizes with wine, one at $1.20 and the other at $1.50 a quart, paying $88.50 for both casks of wine. By mistake, the casks were interchanged, so that the purchaser received more of the cheaper wine and less of the dearer. The merchant therefore returned to him $1.50. How many quarts did each cask hold? A man buys 15 bottles of sherry and 20 bottles of claret for $38. If the sherry had cost 5/4 as much, and the claret 4/5 as much, the wine would have cost $38.50. Find the cost per bottle of the sherry and of the claret. So hopefully that's interesting. It's a sort of a strange thing that you wouldn't really see nowadays. As we can see, these go from basically 1802 to 1906, and often these persisted into the 20s, certainly, but of course you wouldn't see problems like these today. Thanks for watching, and I hope this was interesting.